from our virtual studios in the Netherlands
and Camarillo, California.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is time for the Marketing Geeks radio internet program.
We are back. We are here with an amazing, incredible, stupendous episode where we are going to analyze the shocking truth behind the Fyre Festival.
That's right. And how that dovetails into viral marketing, influencer marketing, how it could go right, how it could go wrong, how to avoid those mistakes for yourself. Plus, we have geek news, we have marketing news, and of course, the world-famous sex robot report.
The number one in the world on podcasting.
Thank you for joining us, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Are you ready to up your marketing game? Then join us now for another fantastic episode of the Marketing Geeks.
Marketing Geeks.
Welcome to the show. How was your weekend, man? What'd you do?
It's still happening right now. It's Sunday, so yeah, you know. But yeah, I didn't do much. I kind of hung out around the house, had a lazy weekend, but I've been traveling the last couple, so it was nice to just be free to do what I wanted. I did watch, and we're going to talk about it. I watched the Fyre Festival documentary on Netflix, and I watched 3 out of 4 of the Ted Bundy miniseries. So we're going to talk a little bit about both of those, but I want to tie that into how specifically the Fyre Festival became like this giant viral thing, and how influencer marketing, how creative, outside the box social media marketing, how all of that played into this hype machine that ultimately was a house of cards or a wolf in sheep's clothing. I don't know. What's the right metaphor here, Andros?
It's a wolf in card's clothing, actually, I think.
There we go. I like that. Yeah.
Looking for. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story because for a number of reasons, but primarily, for those of you who don't know, the Fyre Festival, I'm a festival geek, just so you know, aside from being a marketing geek. Gone to Burning Man for 2 decades and numerous other festivals. And, getting a festival off the ground can be an expensive endeavor because there's a lot of money to be put out. You got to price the tickets right. You got to get the the social media going in the right way. You got to get the awareness up. You got to tap into build a list. You got to develop brand ambassadors. It's hard if you don't have anybody doing it yet, and it's a brand new festival. And the Fyre Festival was a festival that was going to be like this luxury festival on Pablo Picasso's island that was going to be...
Pablo Escobar.
Pablo Escobar, that's right.
Not Picasso.
Same thing, all right.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. They're like the same guy. They're basically the same. Basically the same guy.
One of the Pablos. One
of them paints pictures. One of them's a drug czar. Whatever.
Put them in a room together, you can't tell the difference. But take your pick to which. As a side note, this is a true fact. Pablo Picasso would go to dinner for free most nights, because what he would do is he'd go to a restaurant and he'd pay by check. And they would take the check because he's Pablo Picasso, so they knew it'd be good. But on the back of the check, he would draw a little doodle. So all of a sudden, that check was worth more than the dinner itself, and they would never cash it. So he would never have to pay for dinner. He'd go to expensive restaurants. So there you go.
It's really funny, Andros. Yeah. Well, go finish your statement.
Well, that's it. I tried that, and it just that wouldn't take.
It didn't work. So, yeah. Well, I was just reading a book. There's a book out there called Split Second Persuasion, and there's an anecdote in the book. And I think I'm blanking on which band it was, but there was a famous band that pretty much did the exact same thing. They were doing a concert, and the sound equipment failed, and so they promised everyone in the arena a refund. But what they did was, when they did the refund, the band autographed, every member of the band autographed the check, and then they also put a limited edition band insignia on the check. So basically nobody cashed it because it ended up like the check was ending up worth more than the actual value of the check.
That's funny.
So it's funny because that book even talked about how they employed the principle of scarcity to increase the value. But it's pretty much the same kind of story. That's funny. I just read that yesterday. That's pretty random.
So going, and how that ties into the Fyre Festival is they connected to a lot of famous influencers, and I think Kylie Jenner and a bunch of other like well-known influencers. And they told the influencers, I don't think they even paid them. They just said, hey, if you come, we'll give you like the best of the best lodgings, and it'll be free, and it'll be the time of your life. We'll fly you out there. And it was like a $5,000 ticket, and it included like a flight and top of the line camping and the whole bit. And basically, when people got out there were FEMA tents and nothing else. The food that they gave was just like a little tiny handful of salad and pasta instead of like the top-notch chef that they were promised. And so people just got swindled out of money. But it just goes to show you how influencer marketing and knowing how to position yourself, because they even had like a video that showed what the festival was going to be like, which you can see on YouTube actually. And it because this was going to be the first festival, they had no other. They basically built it out of nothing, and they got enough banana heads to plunk down the $5,000. So, but of course now people are in jail, and Ja Rule, who was one of the co-sponsors, his reputation is shot. So, one of the 48 Laws of Power, great book by Robert Greene, is your reputation is everything. Guard it with your life. And I think the guy who built up the festival had another business that was kind of shady as well, and he ran his businesses and just ran them into the ground and picked up the money as things were collapsing. So.
So the guy that did this, his name is Billy McFarland, and he received a prison sentence of 5 years, he's probably a year or so into it already. He'll probably get out in 3. And he'll probably be a millionaire soon again, because that's what happens to these people. Because he's a true. I would assume he's on the spectrum of psychopathy. He's a bit of a psychopath.
Yeah. Or sociopath. Psychopaths kill people. Sociopaths just don't care, right?
Well, technically the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's marked by a lack of empathy. And what's funny is there's a book out there called the Psychopath Test. It's called the Psychopath Test by John Ronson, and it talks about how psychopaths either end up in prison or they end up as CEOs. So there's not much else room for them in the world. So they're like either going to be in prison because they killed someone, or they become CEOs because they learn how to mask their problems and they have no empathy. And people without empathy tend to get ahead in business, which makes a lot of sense. But going back to the Fyre Festival, I just wanted to share the marketing behind this thing was pretty incredible. So what they did, like you said, they found the top influencers on Instagram, the top influencers on Facebook, and what they did was they promised them big things in return for sharing a single post. So basically, if they were to share one post, they were going to get these incredible things. Kylie or Kendall Jenner, whichever one it was, I forget which one, got paid $250,000 for doing one post. So a single post. Now, I don't know that she ever received the money, but I know that was what she was promised. What they did was they created a campaign where simultaneously around the world, wherever these influencers were located, they all posted this ambiguous orange tile at the exact same time with the hashtag Fyre Festival. So it created this amount of buzz, and eventually it drove people to the website where they showed the video. And the video cost them a ton of money. They probably spent most of their budget on that video, because they brought in the top supermodels of the world to be on Pablo Escobar's island, which he said he owned, but he didn't actually own. And he ended up getting kicked off of that island. They had to move the festival to a different island, which was also a huge problem, because it didn't even have the capacity to hold the amount of people that they had sold tickets to. And it's an incredible story. And essentially what the people that were involved in it said was the real Fyre Festival took place while they were filming that video. That was everything, or Fyre Festival. That was everything that was promised. They were partying. They had the supermodels. They had all that. So that was like really what the festival was. And then when people actually flew out there, they were promised a private jet. They got onto a traditional airplane. They fly out there. They get put onto a bus, a regular bus. They're taken, and it's FEMA tents left over from a hurricane that was out there. And the tents were soaked because it had rained the night before. So it was just a nightmare in so many ways. Now, one other thing, Otto, is to just show you what level of desperation this thing reached. They had run out of money basically to fund like even the smallest elements of this thing. So they, right before the festival, they started emailing all the people, and they're like, well, we don't want you to bring cash to the festival, so we've created our own commerce system. It's called Fyre Cash or something. So go ahead and load up your Fyre Cash with, you want to load it up with at least, or most of our guests are loading it up with $5,000. We recommend going much higher than that. And so people were calling in, and some of them loaded it with as much as like $200,000 on Fyre Cash, and that was just money that they were spending.
Wow!
So it was quite a thing. Now before he created the company Fyre, and Fyre was a platform to book high-end talent. So the concept behind it's kind of interesting because it sounds like a good idea. You'd be able to book like someone like Ja Rule for a birthday party. You'd pay a lot of money for it, but you'd go to their app. You'd be able to get in contact with them directly and book them if you had the money for it. So you could find celebrity talent, book them for a private party, and it would make it easy. So I think that actually was a good idea. Obviously, this thing killed everything. And before he started that company, he had this credit card company, which was basically it was like the black card for millennials, and he would negotiate deals with clubs and concerts and things like that to get people discounts. And get them involved with this credit card company. But it turns out that, again, that was shady practice. He was promising things that weren't really there. And so he has a history of very, very shady business practices.
So, but still, even though he has a history of shady business practices, he was still able to be up and running with this thing. And it's kind of interesting because you and I were talking before the show began about the actual Wolf of Wall Street, who built...
Yeah, Jordan Belfort, yeah.
Yeah, and he ended up... tell me what you told me, because that's really interesting.
It's fascinating. So Jordan Belfort, obviously he went to jail after the events that transpired in the Wolf of Wall Street movie, or he was doing like stock pump and dumps, they call it. So he would basically get tons and tons of people to buy a stock at the exact same time to boost up the price, and then he would sell as soon as the price boosted up and make a ton of money in the process. And he did that, including with like Steve Madden was one of the most popular people that he did that for. And Steve Madden also went to jail for it too, even though he really had very little involvement. He still got caught up in it. But yeah, he went to jail for it. He ended up being an informant, and I think he turned several people in. So they commuted his sentence. I think he served 5 years, maybe even 10. But when he got out, he started a seminar company almost instantly. He got out of there, he started a seminar company, and he started teaching what he calls the straight line system, which is his process for selling to the top 1% of buyers in the world. Or he says it'll work for anybody, but essentially what he accomplished in his life was he taught everyday people how to target the top 1% of wealth in America and how to sell to those people in the language that they need to hear. And he taught them how to do that. So he's created a seminar course to now teach this, and he is back doing quite well from what I understand. I mean, he's been in the media. I know he just wrote a book called The Way of the Wolf, which I actually read. And it's just interesting. So he's probably going to be doing just fine. He's probably made millions of dollars again. These people tend to rise back up, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that Billy McFarland in 5 years is a millionaire again. So we'll see.
Yeah, almost because the infamy serves him, So
it does, yeah.
So it's also this kind of thing where even if you have a bad reputation, just having a reputation of some sort, people will buy into it, even if it's...
Well, especially in the business world, because, there's a lot of people in business that don't care about that stuff. They care about like, well, was he effective in business? That's what they care about. And they're like, well, yeah, he was effective in business. Okay, then I want to work with him. So they don't care that he was shady and immoral and things like that. I think there's less of that. in this kind of industry, whereas in other industries, people would be more reluctant to want to deal with that person or work with that person.
Yeah. So,
because people are all about their own self-interest, right? People are motivated by self-interest, and they think that this guy can make the money. I think they're more likely to work with somebody that they believe can make the money, even if
it's shady.
Even if the way that they acquired that wealth was very shady.
So, going back to kind of the methodology in the Fyre Festival and how they were able to leverage, the whole thing with influencers. It just goes to show you also that I think for the most part, people will not do their research and they look for the storyline that seems to validate kind of what they want. So, for instance, people who looked at the Fyre Festival promo and thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to get to party with Kylie Jenner, and all it's going to cost me is $5,000." And I get all this great stuff, and it's going to be amazing. It's kind of like how con men work, which is they get people to buy into the dream of something, and people become so overwhelmed with what they're wanting in life that they lose track of following a certain track of reality, right? So, and this can be exploited for good or for ill. I mean, we marketers, we can use this power to get people to buy products based on a certain perception, but you can also swindle people out of money using the same techniques. And this gets into something that Edwin Bernays was really good at. And for those of you, I've talked about Edward Bernays a little bit. Edward Bernays was Freud's nephew. And when Sigmund Freud was coming up with his theories and wrote his first books, Edward Bernays was meeting with him regularly and taking those techniques and turning it into the first marketing techniques. So basically, marketing became kind of a form of psychological manipulation. And on a darker level, I think that's what we do as marketers. But used effectively, leveraging the right kind of influencers and the right kind of social proof and the right kind of people in general, you can move mountains and sell anything, right?
Yeah. And I mean, if we go back to the ideas, the principles of influence that we've done episodes on, which these come from Robert Cialdini, the main ones used here, again, social proof was a massive, massive one. There is a ton of social proof involved in this marketing campaign. Every influencer sharing this is every time they put their name on something and they have a big following like that, that's people trust them, and they're kind of putting their trust in them to validate the product. So after this, one of the interesting things one of the consequences of this as well was that the courts were like, should the influencers bear responsibility for the fact that a lot of these people were burned out of their money since they promoted it? And so what they came to decide kind of was that in the future, so they basically did not hold them accountable, but in the future they need to disclose that this was a paid post. So they've really crack down on these influencers need to be telling people if they're being paid to post, they need to disclose that so that things like this are clear, so that they know that it's not just them promoting this product, they're being paid for it as well.
Yeah. And that's, that's interesting because this gets into kind of the new rules of internet marketing in general, like with the GDPR rules and regulations that came down here in Europe. GDPR wasn't such a big deal in America, but over here, everybody had to get ready for it, and it had to do with the way that privacy laws were being exploited. And you hear about all this stuff with Facebook and Google or Cambridge Analytica, and Google ran into a bunch of problems with their privacy, and so it's an interesting, brave new world because again, data can be manipulated so easy and delivered to people on a very pointed level. So there's two kind of moral questions here. As a marketer, right? What is your role and responsibility as a marketer to make sure that you do a good job for your client or for your business? but also stay in integrity, because that's one thing that as we move deeper into the 21st century, I feel that integrity and transparency are going to become more of a theme among how people want to deal with their products and information. And I come from a school of marketing that I don't believe in the pay to play sort of put things on Facebook. I'm more of like create a base of people, create a tribe, if you will, and organically grow your information so it's valuable to people and not just throw it in their face. Mm-hmm. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, what you're talking about is the ethical way to go about this. Yeah. There's no denying, though, that he was very effective with the way he went about things. You can't deny the effectiveness. Now, just kind of going, I just wanted to kind of go a little deeper on this because I talked about the social proof aspect. The other aspect that really drove people to this was the scarcity element. And because it was an exclusive festival, it was on an island. There were only so many tickets available. And the exclusivity that involved with being in a festival with all of these celebrities and models, apparently. So really the way that this thing worked was tons of social proof, scarcity hammered in, and then the video that they used to bring to build hype on this thing really tapped into people's emotions. So anytime you're going to use a video marketing, or if you're going to use video in your marketing, you want to create emotions in people because emotions sell. Mm-hmm. So there's a saying in marketing that basically stories sell and facts tell. So if you're going to sell something, it doesn't matter that you're telling people the details of what's happening. What matters is that you're putting them into an emotional state through story. Yeah. The story that they're telling with this was that you're going to be on an island with models and with the top people in the world, the top celebrities. There's going to be yachts. There's going to be luxury tents. It's going to be pure luxury. The beach is beautiful. The water is beautiful. They built this story of a fantasy that wasn't real, and people fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And if you look at it, and they depended on the influencers to validate the claims, right? And they took their word for it,
right? So the question, the next question on top of that is, as an influencer, does this diminish your brand when the thing that you are influencing turns out to be a sham?
100% does. Yeah. Yes, it definitely diminishes your brand. Now they might have got away with this. Maybe. I think everybody that promoted this took some hit to their reputation, because especially by the people they hurt. And every time you hurt somebody, those people are going to tell all the people they're associated with. It's going to spread. Yeah. And so, yes, I think anytime that you promote something out of a pure profit motive without doing the proper research, without knowing, you're jeopardizing your influence, and you can really hurt yourself. And eventually you could lose all that influence and then make nothing. So sometimes short-term profits are very risky because you risk your long-term value. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what was happening here. Now, in this particular case, even the employees of Fyre, the company behind this, didn't know what was happening. So they were very secretive. So there really wasn't a real way for them to know how bad this really was. So they have that to fall back on. But, it's also, if you put your name on something and it fails, you hold accountability. You put your name out there. You took the risk. That's the risk of promoting something.
Yeah. So it's definitely a tricky sort of thing, because once we did a whole show on finding influencers and how to do this, but it shows two things. But the lesson learned in this is number one, if you coordinate a campaign like this where they had all these influencers work together and pull the trigger at the same time, so millions and millions of people saw this and it generated a buzz instantly. So number one, you can move mountains with the right kind of influence or Russian money. The other lesson around this is that people won't do their research generally. So as consumers, we got to be careful. But also, there are ways to game the system. But if you fail in doing that, it can be very detrimental to your campaign and be very detrimental to your brand. So you've got to walk carefully along these lines. So what would be the kind of like if the Fyre Festival were to do this over, what would be or something similar? What would be the kind of the way that you would want to do this? Well, first of all,
change the brand.
Change the brand. Don't use the same name. But also, if you're looking to do something like this, you've got to show proof that what you're doing is going to be above board and going to be totally within the realms of reality, and show that it's going to, be backed up. I think that one of the things, and this is actually a story that we read in just recently, is that even Facebook is getting into looking for double checking when you run an ad. They want to make sure that the ad that's running is legit, and they have to do that. So as a marketer, you've also got to be prepared to jump through a couple of more hoops when creating advertising and marketing.
And which is necessary, because anybody could create a Facebook page with any name and they could pretend to be somebody and run a damaging ad, technically.
Right.
So it is important they validate where it's actually coming from. But going back to that idea, I don't know that people learn their lessons from something like this, because these are hardwired techniques that human beings fall for again and again and again. I mean, we are evolutionary creatures. We have certain things that trigger our brains, and this was done, like I said, the way that they handled this campaign was very, very effective, very brilliant. Eventually consumers wise up and they do a little bit more research, but I still think that if this was done on a small scale with the exact same techniques, it would probably be pulled off again.
Yeah.
So,
these techniques,
for better or worse. Yeah.
Well, these techniques help elect a president. I mean, if you really look at it that way, it did. So, and that gets into this whole other thing about what's going to happen moving into 2020. So, it's interesting because I've never really thought about the role of a marketer as having to have a certain sense of social responsibility. I mean, a lot of marketers that I know are people who will just say whatever they need to say, run whatever ads they need to run, do whatever they have to do to get the traffic and make the conversion. And I feel that although those techniques can work on the short run, in the long run, things like this can really damage your reputation and ultimately the longevity of whatever it is you're doing. So it's an interesting time because and this is why I decided long ago to step away from kind of the short-term gains and go for more of the long-term SEO-driven marketing and creating content that you can leverage keywords with. I think it works far better in the grand scheme.
I think that's the greatest lesson from this is that short-term thinking, can be very damaging, especially if you look at everything from a long-term play. So the lesson is that you should be looking at things from long-term perspectives. So even though you can make a ton of money in a short term but you're ripping people off, then that's it. Your reputation's shot and you're going to have to change your brand and hope that nobody discovers who you are. And, you're probably not going to get away with it. Now, the other thing is, for somebody to pull this off, they have to have that lack of empathy because most people wouldn't be able to pull something like this off. I couldn't do it. No. I can't imagine that anyone we know could do it. That's why I brought up the fact that this person, I believe, has a marked lack of empathy, and that allows them to be able to pull something like this off. So that is when marketers that have damaging intent get a hold of these techniques, it can create major problems. And that's why we try to make a distinction between manipulation and the concept of influence, where I like to say manipulation is anytime you're using these kind of techniques with a negative intention, and influence is when you're using them with a positive intention, because using these same techniques can be important if you're using them to inspire someone to do something good for themselves. Yeah. So if you're helping someone along the way, or you're inspiring them to get something that's going to make them lose weight and get healthy, you're helping them with prolonging their life, then that's influence, and that's an important thing. But if you're using it to rip them off and take their money, then you're manipulating. And that's the distinction that I would make.
Yeah, well said. And I think it also dives into this other idea about the story that you're telling for marketing. In the next few weeks, we're going to do a whole episode on storytelling for business, which is one of my biggest passions, and talk about how you can basically create a story that gets people to buy in on whatever it is that you're selling and how to do it. And then the next couple of weeks, we are also doing a show on viral marketing. So that touches on both of those things touch on this particular subject that we're talking about. But in the meantime, I've got some interesting news to share. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Yes, it's time once again for Marketing Geek News. I've got some interesting stuff here. First of all, this is from Marketing Land. All advertisers can now buy Google's 15-second non-skippable video ads. We did a whole webinar a couple weeks ago on video marketing, and I got into the types of ways that you can do a video marketing campaign for your business. And the only options that you had were kind of the skippable ads. So you upload a video to YouTube, and then you can use that to market your business. But one of the types of ads that were not available to the average person was the 15-second non-skippable video ads, which are pretty effective because you're forced to sit through a video. Now, you pay for YouTube Red, right?
I do.
Yeah, so you don't see any of those ads. But for those of us who don't, the 15-second video ads, non-skippable, I have to sit through 15 seconds of whatever that is before I watch my Avengers Endgame trailer for the 100th time. So it's cool because now anyone can buy these ads and use them. And the way that you do that is you just create a 15-second ad, you upload it to YouTube, and then you go through AdWords. And if you want to know more about that, then all you need to do is become a subscriber to our show. Hit the link below, and for $4.95 or more a month, you can see all of our back webinars and learn how to do these techniques. We have them available to you. So please become a subscriber, and we will show you all the techniques that money can buy.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So anyway, if you have any questions about it, of course, reach out to us on LinkedIn. And also in YouTube news, this is kind of interesting. YouTube TV. Do you have YouTube TV?
I do not have YouTube TV. I don't even know. Did they rebrand it? Is it still YouTube Red? I'm not even sure. I think they rebranded the name.
No, YouTube TV is a service that YouTube TV subscribers can watch on platforms like CBS. So it kind of integrates TV and YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And it basically, if you have like some cable services, like if you hit on demand, you can go onto YouTube. You can also, if you have like a Google Chromecast or you have a Fire Stick or anything like that, you can you have Google TV. It's basically YouTube that can cast onto your television
Okay.
set.
They did rebrand it though. YouTube Red is now called YouTube Premium. So I just looked that up. So they did change the name of YouTube Red to YouTube Premium, but that's separate from TV. So you're talking about an additional add-on. Yeah.
Well, the YouTube TV is a little bit different. It's a little more. It's $35 a month, and it gives you. It's like a mini cable network.
Yeah.
So you can get it, and if you're doing the full cord cutting, but it's available.
It's a lot like that other. What's that other service that's out there that does something similar?
I don't know. There's a few of them.
Or whatever.
Yeah. So all part of the you know what? What's really funny though, it's like you have this Netflix is a streaming service. You have Disney as a streaming service. You have YouTube as a streaming service. Amazon as a streaming service. HBO. All these other new competitors. The question is this: somebody's going to come along, right? and bundle them all up, and you can get all of them together, and they're going to call it cable. That's my prediction of the month.
YouTube TV is kind of. I mean, it seems like it's kind of similar to Sling. That was the one I was trying to pull out. So Sling is also a kind of a service that's connecting you to live TV. So because like Hulu is like pre-recorded TV. Now you have these live TV streaming ones, and then you have your Netflix for movies. You have your Amazon Prime for movies. So it's crazy, like all these different services. And then Disney, of course, is coming out with one later this year.
Right.
So everything's going to be spread out, and it's going to cost you more than it costs you for cable soon if you want to get all these different services.
Yeah. So anyway, very, very interesting in the time of streaming. This is another news story. This is the most fascinating news story of the week for me. New York Times reports that Facebook plans to integrate WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook Messenger into one sort of thing. So basically what that means is a lot of people are using Instagram. Some people use Facebook Messenger still. I use WhatsApp. You and I use WhatsApp for overseas calls. But they're not integrated. So if somebody only uses Instagram but doesn't use WhatsApp or Facebook, I can't talk to anybody. So they're planning on integrating them so I can talk to anybody on any of those platforms. Why that's important for marketers is because it helps with the customer service experience. I'm recommending to all of my clients that they get a WhatsApp number and put it on their website so they can instantly talk to any of their clients. But it also makes me, it kind of bugs me out a little bit because I don't like the idea that they're going to be integrating it in a way that, again, it's like I don't really trust Facebook with any of my data. Even though I use WhatsApp, they do guarantee that all the communications are encrypted from end to end. But if I say connect with somebody on Facebook or I connect with somebody on Instagram, or the data is available, is it still going to be encrypted? Is it going to be something that will be guaranteed to keep my data safe? I don't know. I don't have the answers to these things. But it is kind of interesting that Facebook is looking at kind of pulling everything under the same roof.
And I think they related this partly to the fear of government regulation over these social media conglomerates like Google, like Facebook, like Amazon. I mean, the big guys. So there's a fear of this, and I think that the fear was that they were going to force them to break up the companies. So by him putting everything under one roof, I think he's trying to make it harder. If regulation comes down, I think he's trying to make it harder for them to break it up. That's kind of what some of the theories online were anyway when he was pulling this off. That it has to do with that fear of future regulation coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and I definitely think it should be regulated because it's interesting to me that people just give away their data so willingly. And as I've always said, if you pay for a product, then you get the product. If the product is free, you are the product. So and of course we don't know ultimately what's going to happen with all this data because when MySpace went out of business, it was eventually sold to a marketing company that just went through all of the data that people uploaded and just scrapped it. Scraped all the data, and they had all this marketing data from people all over the world. So we don't know what's going to happen with all of this. It's definitely
well. Speaking of privacy and data, there's one more story I want to bring up here. The Illinois Supreme Court ruled that companies now can be sued for collecting biometric data without opt-in consent. So, and that's even if there was no tangible injury. And so this is a case that stemmed from a 14-year-old at a Six Flags in Illinois, I presume, because it came from the Illinois Supreme Court, where they took his fingerprint without getting authorization from the parent. And I assume I've been to Six Flags, and I think that's for the season passes. They take your fingerprint as a way of making it easy to access your season pass. And the parents didn't like that. They filed a lawsuit, and now, based on this, it looks like they will be able to sue because they did collect that biometric data without opt-in. Now, I think of this in terms of there's a couple companies. I think of Las Vegas casinos because I know that they're using this data to to find people that are wearing disguises or things like that are like card sharks, or or they aren't welcome in the casinos, they've been banned. And then I also think of, and they're keeping data files on people. And I also think of social media, because social media sites, you have that photo recognition software. They have all this software existing, and they're using it. And the question is, for the users that are under 18 years old, is this a violation of that?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I forget the way that they word this in actual business law, and I think there is some exceptions even if you're under 18, but I don't know what they are, so I'd have to defer that for now. But it's something to think about.
Yeah, for sure, and especially as we move into and something else that we talked about is like beyond biometric data. What about DNA data? Recently, there was a serial killer who was found because he tried out Ancestry.com, and police went through his DNA database and found the DNA, and he was caught. So, when lots of us are doing DNA tests these days, and we don't know what's going to happen with that data either. So, this is getting into like really strange territory, and we don't know ultimately where it's going to go. But I do know this, that of all the strange territory there is, my favorite strange territory in the entire world is, of course, the sex robot territory. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is time, once again, for the sex robot report. Give me a horn. Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah. Who's down for the sex robot report? That would be me. Okay, so this is from this is actually courtesy of you. You found this story. Really good one. dailystar.uk. Sex robot time bomb. AI girlfriends could fuel birth rate collapse. The increasing use of sex robots by lonely men could fuel the population crisis in Japan amid a dramatic birth rate slump, according to artificial intelligence experts. Realistic sex robots programmed to speak, learn, and move on their own have been generating interest as technology becomes more deeply rooted worldwide. Artificial intelligent androids designed to resemble humans have primarily been developed by tech companies to serve as sexual purposes for men and women. However, the debate has been rising as people start using sex robots. Will it drop the fertility rate because people will be having sex with robots versus real people? And I would have to say, you know what? Let's get as many sex robots into the hands of people as possible, because one thing that will help the climate more than anything else is to drop the population. And there are 7.5 billion people in the world right now. By the time our kids are our age, there's going to be 11 billion people on this little tiny planet. So I think that the sex robot revolution could help that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might be onto something here. This might be the catalyst for big change, and maybe this should be involved in political platforms. Maybe we should be talking about this in debates. I mean, we got to bring this to the forefront here. This is the solution to overpopulation problem on the planet.
I think a sex robot, I mean, honestly, if they took all the money from all the wars in the past 20 years and just developed like the ultimate sex robots and got them into people's hands, literally, I think it could do something about population control.
Just make sure you're getting consent before taking biometric data. That's all.
That's true, but the question is, do AI robots have rights, and do you need consent from an AI girlfriend? That's, are we going to live in a future where like our generation is going to be like a second wave of Me Too, and like all these sex robots are going to rise up and be like, that guy never asked for consent before, he groped my robot boob. Is that going to happen? I don't know.
We might be, but we're bringing the awareness, so we're going to be safe, Andros. We will be safe from that.
That's right. For all you sex robots in the future, just know that I'm behind you guys.
30 years from now, listen back to this episode.
And that concludes another kind of weird edition of the Sex Robot Report. Oh, God. So, with that, we got a little more, let's wrap up the show. We got a little, just a couple of geek news things going on. What do you got for me, man?
Well, I was telling you, I watched the Ted Bundy series on Netflix, or 3 out of the 4 of them. Pretty fascinating stuff. And it ties into kind of what I was talking about, how, you either, people that have this marked lack of empathy, they fall into the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, would call them as antisocial personality disorder. More commonly heard to be called sociopaths, but they tend to be either CEOs or they tend to be going to prison. And Ted Bundy, he was an incredibly charismatic, witty, and articulate guy, but he also was a killer. And so it's a fascinating character study of somebody that, doesn't fit the common perception of what you would think would be a killer, because he's considered to be a good-looking guy. He was a law student. He didn't fit any stereotypes, and he was one of the worst killers in history. So, and back then the technology, and also if you watch the documentary, you'll see how terrible the technology was. Like police districts weren't communicating with each other. States were like even further apart from communicating with each other. It was a lot easier for him to get away with things than it would be now. So this was before the advent of the internet. Cell phones weren't around. So it was a very different time also. So interesting stuff, interesting character study. What makes this one unique is that it's actually a interviewer went to visit him on death row and recorded 100 hours of interviews with him. And what the most fascinating part of this whole thing was, Ted Bundy was resisting telling the story, and there was one thing that shifted the whole thing. He decided he had this creative idea where he would have Ted talk in the third person, because if he talks in the third person, this is almost like the O.J. Simpson book, If I Did It. By talking in the third person, he's not incriminating himself, and he can tell his story, and he's such like a narcissist that he wants to tell it, and this gives him the opportunity to do it. So he took it, and he basically tells the story without, even though he's already on death row, without having to incriminate himself officially, even though he basically is. Yeah.
Wow. Pretty interesting. Another Netflix very interesting show that I've been watching is You.
I've been watching that too. I'm like 3 or 4 episodes in. Yeah.
Yeah. Now You, just to keeping it mostly spoiler free. It's about a guy who's a sociopathic stalker, but he's also very charming. And it's an interesting show because you're not really sure who to root for in this. But I'm intrigued. I'm on episode 8, so maybe we can give a full rundown when we're both through it. But You has been really interesting.
It's kind of like Dexter in some ways. I mean, that's like the best comparison I could give. It's not quite like it, but it's got some comparisons.
Yeah,
it's a good show, and I it's funny because we're like, this whole show is about like psychopaths apparently. But I also saw they dropped that off the success of this Netflix documentary on Ted Bundy. They dropped a trailer for a new Ted Bundy movie starring Zac Efron. And there's a little bit of controversy already. The movie is titled Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. And because I'm watching the documentary, I recognize that was the sentence that the judge handed him right before giving him the death penalty. So that's what he called him. But there's some controversy because the preview is like to upbeat kind of music, and it almost is glorifying him. So a lot of people are saying like, this is exactly what Ted Bundy wanted. You're like glorifying him as like an action star almost. Like the trailer feels a little too upbeat for what it really was. So it's and that's a very valid point. So it's one thing to be fascinated by these people, but yeah, you don't want to glorify the behavior, and we don't want copycats or anything like that. So
Yeah, it's really crazy because some of the actually I've been listening to a lot of different crime podcasts lately. One of them I've been listening to is one called Dirty John and another one called Dr. Death. Both of those are about psychopaths as well, since we're in the psychopathic tip. But
such an upbeat episode.
It really is. Well, psychopaths are fascinating, and it's because what's the statistic? There's like 2% of the population are psychopaths, but something like 20% of CEOs are psychopaths.
Well,
or sociopaths.
I don't know if it's proven, but yeah, it's a high. I don't know where the data. I don't know where the data comes from. But
so it's got to be true. From the internet.
It comes from the internet.
So it's got to be true.
Yeah, I think it's like it's either 1 or 2% of people have the actual condition of antisocial personality disorder, which is the official diagnosis. So
yeah, interesting. Anyway, I'll check out the Bundy thing, and then we'll definitely give a full report. And finally, the John Wick Chapter 3 trailer dropped this week. Looks glorious. You know what? I heard this great story about Keanu Reeves. When Keanu Reeves first moved to Hollywood from Canada, or from Hawaii, I think, he didn't know anybody. And so he was bumming around Venice Beach, and he saw some guys playing street hockey. So he asked if he could just work his way in. And they said, sure. They didn't know this guy, but pretty soon he, became Keanu Reeves. But he stayed with those guys and made friends with them and played street hockey with them for 10 years while his career just blew up. And he just stayed like down to earth. I met Keanu Reeves once, which here's my Keanu Reeves story. It's kind of funny, but I was doing market research for a film company. And I walked up to him to see if he wanted to come to a screening of a movie on Tuesday night, because this is like in Hollywood, you give out movie passes and they test movies before they come out in the theaters. And I walked up to this guy who was just like hanging out, drinking a beer on the street in a paper bag. And I asked him if he wanted to see a movie, and it was Keanu Reeves. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, hey, well, what movie is it? And I'm like, you know what? I can't send you, unfortunately, because you're in the entertainment industry. But I noticed he had a motorcycle helmet. And I was riding a motorcycle too. And I said, what kind of bike do you ride? And he said, I ride a Ducati. And I said, I drive a Honda. And it's this make and model. And he's like, oh, that's a classic bike. So we started rapping about motorcycles, just like two dudes, And we were having this, we talked maybe for like 15 minutes. And there was this one moment when I was like, hey, man, you want to go get a beer? And there was a couple of things that went through my mind. And the first thing was like, you heard the rumor that Keanu Reeves may be gay, and I don't care if he is or not. But if he was, I wanted to ask him if he wanted to come have a beer with me, but then I didn't want him to think I was hitting on him, right? Because then if it turns out he was gay and he had a beer with me, I might have to have sex with Keanu Reeves. That would,
wow.
I mean, if I'm going to have sex with I'm not, whatever, some guys like to, have sex with other guys. It's not my preference, but I would consider it because he's Keanu Reeves. And then on the other side of my thinking was like, I think that Keanu Reeves would think I'm weird, to ask like, what if, like, what I'm saying was just awkward, but I actually wish to this day that I did ask him for a beer because he seems like a cool guy, and I would have liked to just chat with the dude for a while.
And Keanu, if you're listening, Keanu, maybe you could take Andros up on that beer.
Yeah, come down into the Netherlands, and I don't, maybe I don't know, but as a famous person, it's also hard to make friends. And I would totally be friends with you, Keanu Reeves. I totally would.
What's funny about Keanu Reeves is he's like probably nobody's done more with less, right? I mean, he's not like he doesn't have the most range. You can't say he has a lot of range as an actor, but he's made some of my favorite movies. I mean, he's made some incredible films. He's involved in The Matrix. I mean, when I was younger, I really liked the Speed movie he was in. I mean, Bill and Ted. He's done now the John Wick series took off, and I mean, there's more and more. And he's had quite a career with what I would say is a bit of a limited range. but he's made. I mean, he's done incredible. And I mean, Point Break. I mean, the guy's got a resume that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with the fact that he's kind of like tofu, where tofu takes on the flavor of whatever you cook it with. So I think that's basically, I mean, because there's some actors like Jack Nicholson. It's hard to watch Jack Nicholson and not go, that's Jack Nicholson playing that character.
Which is why, like in like almost probably 75% of Jack Nicholson's movies, his character is named Jack.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for Marketing Geeks, the Psychopath episode.
That's right.
Psychopathic marketing.
You learned just how close Andros was to having that beer with Keanu Reeves and what else might have happened.
And one of these days I'll tell you my Hunter S. Thompson story, which is equally as fascinating.
Oh, I want to hear that one. Yeah.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell 500 of your closest friends about the show. Leave a review. Tell us how great we are. That helps. Of course, if you really want to help, then just hit the link below and become a sponsor of the show. Donate a little bit of money, you get a lot back in return. And I appreciate so much each and every one of you who do listen to the show, all 7 listeners. Thank you. You guys are awesome.
From the bottom of our hearts here at Marketing Geeks, we absolutely love you. So we want you to go home tonight, tell every single person that you've ever met, that you've ever known about